We were going for a 70s jazz thing with the electric piano, but we're not musical enough to pull that sort of thing off, so it's a pop song. Talk about humble. Well, if this is a pop song, then it's the best pop song ever written. In this video, I'm breaking down the composition of Subterranean Homesick Alien from Radiohead's amazing album OK Computer, and that title is a reference to the Bob Dylan track Subterranean Homesick Blues. Hi, this is Ixie from the future. I'm here to tell you that I've spent way too many hours on this video already. Every single time I listen to the song, I hear something new or different, or like a note I heard wrong, like a little higher than it is, or realizing this part is played by a guitar, but that part later on is played by the Rhodes. And then also every repetition is... let's just enjoy the song together, okay? I'm gonna maybe get some stuff wrong, or I'm gonna miss some parts, and it's okay. This is a masterpiece of arranging and layering. Let's continue. I love this track. I feel like this is a very magical, lighthearted, dreamy track. It really pulls you into its world, and there's something a little bit innocent about it, and also a little bit self-assured. I have a few facts that I'll share with you at the end of the video about what the band members said about, making the track and what it's really about, but I know you're here for the analysis, so let's get to it. So the intro, 3 beautiful chords with a melody woven between them. Johnny's playing this lead and Colin supporting with the bass. The chords are D minor, A flat major, and then D major. And they're all inverted with the 5th on the bottom. So there's a resonance to the way they sound. The D minor, the magic. This is us opening the book and then going, oh, wow, right? And then, come hither, child. I've always loved that second chord, especially. So dramatic. And the reason is because it's very much unrelated to the D minor chord. They don't come from the same key at all. And the A flat major chord is starting on possibly the most unstable part of any scale, the flat 5 or the tritone. Like if we had D minor, then that's the A flat. You hear how tense and unstable it sounds? Like you couldn't end a song like that. Well, you can actually if you're Trent Reznor. But instead of this chord being like a key change, it just shoots us right back down to D. You walk through one door and then you're like, oh, where the F am I? This is like a storybook to me. It feels like opening a tome, and the light shines in your face when you open it. And it's just so full of wonder. Every note that Johnny lands on, the are notes in those chords. But what's really satisfying about them is they're approached so chromatically. Little bit of just half-step motion. Same here. So the curtain lifts and the bass has come in on the A flat. It waits. I love that. Chugging. And then both Johnny and Colin kind of tumble down. And it does feel like you just tumbled into some wormhole and then you're in a whole other world. And then we land in the key of G Mixolydian, where all your dreams come true. Also known as rock major. It's like G major, but it has an edgy chord. The verse has always felt very gentle to me, Part of that is just the tone of all the guitars. And the Rhodes, which is what Tom's playing, also has an incredible aqueous nature to it. It sounds like light, kind of reflecting in the water. Wow, 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 right? Like Johnny's guitars and also Ed's sound so much like rockets or shooting stars, maybe bird calls as well. But there's just these little dives that they do, right? Or even going up, and then, it's so evocative. I kind of feel like they're describing like a starry night sky or the universe, right? All the little lights and twinkles. And then this gentle drum groove that feels like it's soothing, It's so tasteful. And Colin is like the warm blanket around you, holding down this G on every chord. Okay. Then this top note goes down. This is called a G6. And it goes down again to this chord. We'll talk about that one a lot. And then it resolves to G major. So you can see this line goes da, 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 chromatically walking down. And that's probably how it was composed. Okay, so why is this chord so incredible? Okay, this is the chord that I've heard other musicians refer to as the nostalgia chord, and I definitely think it fits the bill in this case. This is called the minor 4 chord. This is the chord that starts on the 4th note in a scale, and it's a minor chord. So minor, not major, which is brighter, more confident, fragile. So in the context of a very major sounding song, right, all of this, to have this minor chord is such a icy, cold breeze from the past. And you'll see them kind of take advantage of that moment in multiple ways throughout the song. Oops, the sun came out. The way Tom is playing these chords is a little hard to pin down because they're so watery and there's so much delay and they're going wow, wow, wow. They're just swimming. It's just not very clear. But something like... And sometimes he kind of does this like... kind of all the way walking down. Now, if you recognize that sound, that's the sound of another scale that's related, Mixolydian flat 6, which is what Airbag is in. Right? Right before Tom starts singing, he does a little foreshadowing of a little bit. So remember that. Perhaps the unexpected hero of this song is Colin, the bassist. So first, Colin very tastefully holds down a G.
The breath of the morning, I keep forgetting the smell of the warm summer air. I live in a town where you can't smell a thing. You watch your feet for cracks in the pavement.
This also matches up with a drum groove accents as well, which is what a good bassist does. Well, not always, but I mean like when the bassist and a drummer in a band are really in sync with each other, because they're the support, right, for everything, then really great stuff happens. Would you like to go outside? All of these chords have a G in them, so Colin's holding down the G as a pedal point. This really grounds Johnny's soaring melodies, right? Because otherwise it feels like you could literally just fly away. But I would say that Colin's bass sticks firmly to G Mixolydian, and utilizes it very melodically. So sometimes he's got like stuff like that. But at the end of phrases, he'll often do a run. So the first one goes, and the second one goes, and sometimes it goes down, and sometimes it jumps up. It's incredible that there's so much space, though, for that to come through with all of the layering. But if you think about the density of these layers, right, they're very thin. The Rhodes, the watery Rhodes, the soaring upper guitar parts with the phaser or flanger on them. And then Ed and Colin have a lot of room to work with. And boy, do they work with it in the chorus, but we're not there yet. And now to Johnny's part. He's so many parts in this song, but the first one, do you recognize this? That's right. It sounds a lot like Airbag, which could have been a total coincidence, or maybe it's just a little musical Easter egg. Johnny is outlining the chords at first. So remember, those chords are G dominant seventh. He goes, so look, he's just playing 3 out of 4 of those. And he's landing on the third, which is a very vulnerable, I think, part. It's like the heart of the chord. Then it changes to the G6, and he, instead of going again, which would have created some clashing, it doesn't sound terrible, but he just moves the F down to the E. So there's a little note change. Then we go here, breaks the pattern at that resolution. Rhythmically, it's really beautiful too, because it has this sort of outside the box rhythm. It sort of sometimes sounds like, duh, but a lot of times it sounds like triplets, like, now what's Ed doing here? Well, I've watched several live performances, and not being a guitarist and not being able to interpret the visual, and also the fact that they don't focus on, anyone but Tom as much as they probably should, I just can't confirm what he's doing, but it sounds a little bit like he's kind of doing like just a little kind of moments. And then at the very end, he does a suspension, but it's up here, sorry. And then like that. So this suspension is going to come back a lot, this sound. There's one more element to go over before we start talking about Tom, who's about to sing, and that's Phil on the drums. So this song is in 6/8, which has this really nice lilt to it. It's groupings of 3, which have, a bit more of an organic feeling. It's almost like the most natural thing to dance to in the world. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 2 main beats divided by 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, and 2. I am a huge fan of these drums, and just Phil in general. I feel like he doesn't get enough recognition, but that's true for a lot of drummers that aren't like flashy. It's such a great groove. And I know this groove well because in my 30s, I decided I'm going to learn drums. I've always wanted to, and I'm just going to do it. It was really hard. But 2 weeks into learning drums, I was like, I'm going to learn this song, and talk about running before you can walk. It's not that difficult of a groove, but it has a lot of syncopation, and it has a bit of a shuffle feel, which is when you've got ghost notes, which is little taps on the snare, interplaying with the hi-hat. Go, 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 go. So the snare plays off of that last kick. Hi-hats are just on the 8th notes. And then what happens with the ghost notes, I love so much. He plays the ghost notes in between the hi-hats and trails them off dynamically. Like, why do I like that so much? I think it just makes it feel more 3-dimensional or something, right? tuck, tuck. Almost like a built-in delay effect. And then he does this fill at the end of every 8-bar phrase. It's a little bit different pretty much every time, but he does have one classic kind of ja ga ga da ja. Then he has the ja ga 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 da ja. But it starts to feel comforting because it happens every time. Okay, so now Tom. Tom's still playing the Rhodes. The other guitars kind of take a back seat a bit. It's mostly just bass, drums, and the Rhodes with those sort of soaring accents from Johnny and Ed. Tom sings, "The breath of the morning that I keep forgetting, the smell of the warm summer air." So this melody sounds so floaty and dreamy to me. Mostly on the third, with a little bit of a neighbor tone there. Has this push-pull feeling, right? That I keep forgetting. There's some really nice harmony going on between those. A ninth. Smell of the warm. Now this smell, can you hear that it's tense? So there's like this incredibly beautiful clash that reminds me so much of like the clashes in Pyramid Song and some others. It's the kind of clash that they're not afraid of, which I really appreciate. Smell of the warm. You can feel the tension release. So it makes this note so much more delicious to be preceded by the tense one, which is the leading tone of C. Okay, so da-da, smell the warm summer air. Live in a town where you can't smell a thing. Yeah, this melody just kind of hovers a little bit. It's not moving much. You watch your feet. Now that is so pretty. We're going to hear that later, right? My software says that that's a C minor 6. Yeah. That makes the chord sound even more nostalgic to me, doesn't it? You watch your feet, the cracks in the pavement. It's another kind of suspension. It's not the holy sounding suspension. It's just a other really pretty one. Sus2. Sus4 is positioned right above the third, and the sus2 is positioned below it. And this delivery feels so folky to me, like, you live in a town where you can't smell a thing. Kind of, the cadence of it's kind of folky. You watch your feet for the cracks in the pavement. More speech-like than like musically rhythmic. There's a little space created by these interludes in between verses and choruses, where we just hear these chords and all the little touches that they add around them. Then the second verse, we have the up above. Now there's a new note that Tom's singing, and this whole melody moves more. And up above is so great because he goes up above where he used to go, like the highest note he was singing. He goes up to this one, so up above. Tension, but pretty. Aliens hover. I love hearing the word hover on a suspension. It's perfect, because it's hovering. Making old movies. So they really like hammer home the nostalgia on this particular instance on home movies, which I think is such a great expression of the meaning in the lyrics right there. But he goes, making home movies. The whole making home movies, that push up is kind of theatrical. For the folks back home. And this time he ends on a tense note. This is called the ninth. And it makes this chord, it's called an add 9. And it's way beautiful. Like if you ever want to make your major chord even more beautiful, add a ninth. Whether it's right in there or it's up here, just do it. For the folks back home. So pretty. All right, then there's another interlude before our very first chorus, right? They're really building this up for us. And we get this gorgeous line from Johnny. The last note of each of those groupings lines up with the chords. Suspension. Right there, see? Move to the E, he lands on E, then it moved to E flat, so did he. And then he comes down in the way that he has been on that beautiful G major chord. I'm pretty sure I made this comment on Airbag and also Paranoid Android, but I'll probably just keep saying it at every video. The amount of fantastic melodic lines that Johnny comes up with in one song is mind-expanding to me. It's really cool because they're all so good and memorable. And I've been analyzing lots of music over the past 2.5 years that I've had this channel, and I don't recall myself thinking this before. All right, we made it to the chorus. So there are 3 chords in the chorus. F major, C major, and then to G. So this is a classic, solid Mixolydian chord progression. The flat 7 to the 4 chord, major 4 chord, and back to our home bass, which is G. What I like about this chord progression is that it emphasizes the edgy part of the key, which is the F chord, and it's the first chord. And anytime you start a chord progression away from your home bass, I feel like it's just a little bit more interesting or emotionally compelling. Just a little bit. So we got uptight, uptight. And then on this G chord, so many things are happening, and I will break it all down. He sings, they're just uptight, uptight. I really like this for a couple reasons. One is that the way it follows the chords is really beautiful. Uptight. He goes, uptight. And this note is the note that fits most harmoniously with the next chord. Uptight. And then this one also fits more harmoniously with this chord. So it's sort of like he's going to the next note early, like preceding the chord it belongs to. So it's got this feeling of forward momentum. But if he didn't do that, it would sound a little bit more wooden. So you'd have uptight, uptight. See? But we got uptight, uptight. Way cooler. The music sounds really liberated and happy here. So I always thought it was weird almost to hear him singing the words uptight. But I think the music is more about how he feels, right? And not about describing them, the uptight people. He's confident. He knows himself, right? This believer. They're just uptight. And this somehow reminds me of like 60s or 70s psychedelic rock, like organ lines, like something that Yes would have written. So this is very pattern-based. Da, 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 da. It's the same exact note grouping, just starting in a different place in the scale. Same pattern, same part of these chords. Rhythmically, this is creating a polyrhythm with the time signature. So you've got this 3 against 2 situation. Da, 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 da. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1. Well, I think I just realized that I can really only count whatever my right hand's doing. That's weird. Johnny live is playing this very high, shimmery G major chord. And it's one of my favorite parts. It's like up here. So while this is all going down, and it kind of releases when we get to the G. So it builds kind of from nothing and really comes to life on the C chord. And I was like, okay, why am I so in love with this G major chord? Well, the tone of it is really just gorgeous. It's like light bursting through the clouds, or the spaceship coming through the clouds. I don't know. There's some just total like, wow feeling. But also, harmonically, this G chord over the C, that is just a beautiful sound. Like, damn. And if I take this G major chord and kind of invert it down here, then you see just stacked thirds. Major, 7th, 9th. There's those ninths again. But this voicing is even better because you can hear the separation. This major chord over this major chord. And it just feels like it's pulling you to this, but preemptively, right? You're still here, and it's like, come with me. Then the bass. Now this is the real clincher, right? Okay, so at first, Colin is holding down the roots of the chords until you get to G, and then some things start to happen. So he's going to go F, C, then to G, and every time he does something a little different. Here are some of the things he does. Root, root, root. They are utilizing this scale so beautifully and musically, right? Because this is all just a scale too. And this is also literally, we're on G, so you go. By the time you get up to the F, it's the F chord. It's so gratifying to listen to. It also sounds a little innocent, though. This contributes to that feeling of like, this is maybe like a child's fantasy or a childlike fantasy, perhaps. So it's just got this uptight, uptight. So the first time Ed does the root of the F chord, the root of the C chord, and then G, D. Second time, he does the same walk up the scale, but just slower. So F, C, G. What a variation, right? Then the third time, he goes and harmonizes with one of the guitars, which I just think is really cool. I don't hear that very often. You know, the bass guitar like in lockstep parallel harmony with a guitar line. That should happen more. So that goes. This chorus is phrased in 3, and we saw that happening in Airbag especially, but they do this a lot. They kind of have a regular phrasing when it's appropriate. They don't draw out phrases just so that they're 4 or something even. You know, if the time is come to move on, they just move on. So in this case, you get 3 sections of uptights before we get uptight. So that's just lovely. You know, it kind of matches the sort of organic but sort of unpredictable nature of anything grouped or phrased in 3. And then the drums. Okay. So the original drum pattern from the verse is just made bigger here in the chorus at first. And then we get these really nice fills from Phil. At first, Phil is just playing the hi-hat, and he opens it a little bit so that it has a little bit more sizzle and energy, and he opens it wider and wider. At least that's how it kind of sounds to me, which also sort of feels like the opposite of the trailing ghost notes, but it creates dimension. It's a big crescendo. The first one goes goom, 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 ch, which is just like the verse drums, but with the hi-hat open, so it's bigger. And he goes goom, 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 ch, digga, 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 digga. So he will sometimes play that digga, 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 digga fill on just the snare, and sometimes he will spread it between the snare and a tom. Digga, 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 right? Or digga, 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 digga. Okay. And then the second one, the rhythm changes, where it's sort of like he just dropped a couple of those 30-second notes out. So, dun, dun, which has all this like syncopation, and it's so much more, it's the kind of rhythm you can sink your teeth into. It's very memorable. It's a little bit more playful, right? You know what it is? Kind of sounds like a gallop, right? All right, now we're back to an interlude before our final verse and chorus. And some really beautiful stuff happens that hasn't happened before. Imagine that. So this is the first chord of the song, right? G dominant 7th, major chord with a edgy minor 7th on top. And it just happens to go past the bottom and down to the other F. So leaving you on the tense part of the chord. Second time though, the chord is got the E, not the F. So then we have E, D. Same pattern, you see, just applied to the 2 different chords. Sorry. Then, this I love so much. We have to figure out why. Why is that so good? So first of all, I can definitely tell that there's some notes in there that aren't in this C minor chord. So first we have the C flat and the E flat and the C, but then there's an A, G, F. So the A and the F don't belong. It sounds so mystical. Johnny comes in to sort of echo just a few of those notes. So basically it's a call and response. Tom starts. Then Johnny goes, da da da. Second chord. Da 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 again, and then da 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 da. Da 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 at the end, which is really, really beautiful because we have the suspension. We got some really beautiful permutations of the guitar lines to look at. One is the soaring shooting stars that Johnny's doing as he hits an F sharp for the first time, and it's really, really pretty listen.
Show me the world as I'd love to see.
This is called a leading tone in a major scale. So it's one task. Its one purpose in life is to go up to the G, to the tonal center, number 1. It's so close and it creates all this tension. It just needs to go there. Right? This F sharp doesn't belong in G mixolydian though. We've had an F natural. So then we get this super major sweet sound. I just really like that one little touch of the major scale, just a little droplet.
Love to see.
And then high up, Johnny. Such a great line. Who doesn't sing along to that one, right? Wow. That feels extra nostalgic, doesn't it? Like it wants to go down to this one, which is also tense, but then we get to the section where Tom is saying, I tell all my friends, but they'd never believe me. He gets a little bit agitated, right? Imagining like, well, if I did get abducted, no one would believe me and they would think I'm crazy, right? So everything gets a little bit more agitated. The tone of Johnny's guitar, at least in the recording, gets a little bit more, like it has a bite to it. And Phil starts playing with a little bit more fills and a little bit more of a robust sound. So we get this great guitar line playing at the same time as Tom, which really hasn't happened before, right? Where like Tom is contending with another guitar line. So it goes. It has this feeling of a suspension, even though it's not, because it has this little wiggle. But you still get that sound. Even prettier, and then like just listen to me, right? And then and I love the way he comes down and back up. When he goes down, guess what? Colin goes up. Not exactly sure all the notes he hits, but he definitely goes da 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 da. So you get this. At the end of this, show them the stars and the meaning of life. It shut me away. And then we wait. It shut me away. Which is such an open-ended musical sentence, essentially. So you're just hanging. You're hanging. It shut me away. But I'd be okay. I mean, all right, shit. And that moment, that feeling of abandonment is highlighted as like everything abandons him, right? He's just left alone. And slowly it all comes back. When you create this kind of contrast in music, you are inviting the listener to just sit there with you in that moment, right? There's nothing else to do. I think this moment's beautiful because it's basically like he's saying like, well, everyone could think something horrible about me, but it doesn't matter. Everyone could abandon me and it doesn't matter because I know myself, or I know it's true, or I would have had the best experience, of my life. Like, there's just something so self-assured about it. I would always experience a bit of like, I'm thrown off the rhythm here. Like, I'm not quite sure of my footing until, all right. There's so much syncopation in his vocal line and in the guitar and the bass that it's kind of ambiguous what's going on exactly. You should watch me when I was drumming. I wouldn't count. And so I'd be like, oh, and by the way, when the drums come back in for the last interlude before the last chorus, Phil switches to the ride cymbal, which just has a little bit more of a like cool sound, right? Like, would I be all right? In the last chorus, there's more power behind Tom's vocals, and the bass is doing what it does best. It's just slamming on those root chords at first. Uptight, uptight. Just like so heavy on the G. But then we get a completely different melody from him that we haven't heard before. This is kind of a bluesier version. He's all over the place, and every one of them sounds amazing. At one point he goes, da, da, which is like the ultra satisfying way to go to that C, is to go to G first. Because G is the fifth of the C chord, so it's like very leading and strong sounding. Just like the beginning, the story ends. Beautiful atmosphere. There's an element from the very beginning, and it's played even an octave higher. And literally, it is bookended by the exact same three chords that we heard at the very beginning in the actual intro, while the bass guitar continued to do what they were doing. Tom on the Rhodes goes up those chords, and he adds a little bit of melodic connective tissue between them, kind of like the guitar is. And they really, really sparkle. So that's why the ending is extra shiny as he goes. It really does feel like we just shut the book on this magical adventure we were just on. And all the magic and all the light goes into the book, and then, the shot drifts back, and it's like nothing ever happened. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for being patient. If you want to support what I'm doing, do the usual: like, subscribe, leave a comment, share, and turn on the notification bell, and maybe leave a super thanks in the comment. You have to, if you have the means. I also have a Patreon, and that is my emotional and financial lifeblood. We have a really great community, so that's an awesome way to make sure that I continue to do this and finish this project. You have access to a Discord and musical challenges every month and listening parties. It's really, really fun. I appreciate you so much. Thank you to my patrons. Here are a couple of fun facts I stumbled across on my research about the meaning of the song. The original title was called Uptight, and the sonic palette of the song was inspired by Bitches Brew, which is a Miles Davis record. Tom said, "The first essay I ever wrote in school was, 'You are an alien from another planet. You have landed, and you are standing in the middle of Oxford. And write an essay about what you see if you're an alien from another planet. How would you see these people?'" And that's where a lot of it came from, really. In another interview, he said, "Johnny's in the basement mixing up the medicine. I'm on the pavement thinking about the government. Do I really hope to be on a spaceship? Why not? I believe there are aliens under the ground. I want to see them. I want to see ghosts. I want to walk on the street smiling, knowing that there are little green creatures with incredible large brains and big, beautiful black eyes that are filming us with their video cameras." And then Johnny said, to him, it's just about hope and faith, I think, more than aliens.